Welcome to Equip Daily Bible Studies. I'm your host, Brad DuFault, and we are starting a brand new series today on the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. And today we're just going to read Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. So go ahead and read that in your paper Bibles, or if you don't have one, go ahead and click the link in the description. That was a very short, simple verse, wasn't it? But there is a ton of stuff there for us to learn. Here are three really important things we can get from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. The first is that God is awesome. He made everything. Think about how big stars are, how huge space is, how beautiful a sunset is, how cool animals are. This was all God's idea, and if all that stuff is awesome, then the mind that thought those up is awesome. And the power that was able to create them is even more awesome. Later on in the Bible, King David is thinking about this point, and he writes down Psalm 19. He's looking at the stars in the sky, which he calls the heavens. And he says this, he says, "The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship." That's his creativity. "Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a word or sound, and their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world." He's saying that everyone can look up and see that God is awesome, and you can see it by what he's made. And King David thought that when to him, 3,000 years ago, stars were just spots of light in the sky. How much more should we think that now that we know how incredibly huge stars are? So lesson 1 is that God is awesome. Lesson 2 is that God made us. If he made us, that means he owns us. We belong to him. So we're supposed to do what he says. But more than that, the fact that he made us, it doesn't just show we're supposed to do what he says. It shows that we should do what he says, that he knows what's best for us. Think about it. If you have something like a machine and you're not sure what it is, you go to the person who designed it to find out how it works. For us, what are we? Have you ever wondered that? Like, what am I? What is my purpose? Well, those are really good questions, and if we want to find out how we should live, what is best for us, we should go to the one who designed us. So that's lesson number 2, is that God made us, and therefore he knows what he's talking about when he tells us what to do. Lesson number 3, and we're going to get a little nerdy here, is that the universe had a beginning. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And before that, there was no universe. This is a mind-blowing idea. I want you to try to picture before God created the universe, there was nothing. There's just blackness. Picture it. No, wait. No, there's not even blackness. There's just empty space. Except there's not even any space. There's just nothing. Nothing at all. And then God says, "Let there be light." And boom! Universe. Now you might be thinking, if there was nothing, then how was God there? Well, there was no thing, there was nothing, but God isn't a thing, okay? When we say there is nothing, there was no space, and there was no solids or liquids or gases. See, God is not like that. He is spirit. He's not like us. We're solid and some liquid and sometimes a little bit of gas, you know. But God is different. He is spirit. He's not a physical thing. So he can exist when there's no universe. Now, believe it or not, this idea that the universe had a beginning lines up with modern science. It didn't used to be that way. Most people thought the universe had just always been there. After all, that kind of makes sense, right? How could it just start from nothing? And what could there possibly have been before that? It's really hard for people to get their heads around it, except the people who believed the Bible always believed that God created in the beginning and that before that there was nothing. And those people who believed the Bible looked pretty stupid to everyone else until like 100 years ago when science started to prove that the universe did have a beginning. Here are two ways that modern science proved the universe had a beginning. Number one is anytime you look at a star from a really, really powerful telescope, you see something called red shift. Red shift is something you see when you look at a light and it's moving away from you. Every star you look at is moving away from you, which means that the universe is spreading out. Stars are all spreading out as it goes into the future. So if you take it back into the past, that means they all came from being all scrunched in together. So that's the first way that science has proved the universe had a beginning, is that it is spreading out. The second way is that there is leftover energy from a big explosion that took place in all of space at the same time. You're like, I'm confused. Well, let me make you even more confused by telling you what this is called. It's called cosmic background radiation. The term is weird, it's a little hard to understand at first, but the idea is not that difficult. You know how when there's a big explosion, it goes and the bigger the explosion, the longer it goes. Well, you hear something like that in space anywhere you go, and it's this leftover explosion energy from something. And the only thing it could possibly be is from the Big Bang when the universe was first created. And you can actually hear or see this if you take a radio or a TV that isn't picking up on any other signal, it's just listening to empty space, and you can hear the energy in space. Isn't that awesome and super nerdy? And I totally warned you about that part. But this is really cool because it shows that believing in the Bible is reasonable. That it's not just blind faith. You don't have to turn off your brain and throw out science if you want to believe the Bible. But at the same time, the Bible is not a science textbook. So next time we're going to look more at Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to see how do we think about the Bible and science. Do they fit together at all? And if so, how? So that'll be a great study. So please join us then. And until then, be strong in grace.